evening from New York. I'm Chris Hayes. This week, we've been watching protests gather across the country.
Consequences necessary. Mr. President, I'm honored beyond words to be part of this team under your
Sirens tore through midnight America. Across Atlanta, Chicago, and Portland, black-clad agents kicked in doors while flashbangs ripped through living rooms. The chants, once painted on city walls, "No Trump, no KKK, no fascist USA," had become evidence. What began as protest now stood accused of terrorism. Within hours, the FBI and the Department of Homeland Security executed the largest domestic counter-terror operation in a decade. Their target? The operational core of Antifa, reclassified as a networked extremist organization under federal RICO statutes. BBC News revealed that these charities functioned as decentralized laundering cells. Over $300,000 had been funneled through digital payment apps, disguised as community aid. DW traced the pattern to Oregon and New York, where similar solidarity accounts financed the transportation of militants. The discovery led the Treasury Department to join the task force, introducing a financial warfare dimension. For the first time, domestic extremism met counter-cartel economics. Defense News describes the architecture of Iron Resolve as a fusion of counter-terror methodology and criminal interdiction. Algorithms analyze chat logs in real time. Facial recognition AI cross-referenced protest footage with flight manifests. Within hours, agents pinpointed the identities of regional coordinators. Jane's Defense Weekly compared the approach to NATO's multi-domain operations, integrating cyber, financial, and human intelligence into one seamless strike. President Donald Trump addressed the nation at noon. "We will not allow violent extremists to hide behind protest. The same law that crushed the mafia will crush domestic terror." The message was clear. America had moved from containment to eradication. Yet beneath the success, unease brewed. Civil liberties advocates, interviewed by The Guardian, warned that the operation blurred the constitutional line between protest and preemption. Could the government distinguish ideology from intent? Or was this the start of a doctrine where dissent itself risked surveillance? Globally, the ripple effect was profound. Al Jazeera reported that Russia condemned the operation as domestic militarization, while China accused the US of political cleansing. But within NATO, European counter-terror units quietly praised the model, adapting its methods to combat anarchist collectives spreading through Berlin, Athens, and Paris. The age of reactive policing was over. The era of predictive enforcement had begun. Strategically, Iron Resolve marked the fusion of domestic security and digital warfare. Every encrypted chat room became a potential battlefield, every donation a traceable node. DW analysts called it the internalization of counterinsurgency, America applying foreign war tactics to its own soil. By nightfall, dozens of suspects were in custody. Crypto wallets froze mid-transaction. Federal servers hummed with data streaming from every seized laptop. The victory was undeniable. But so was the cost. Because as the digital smoke cleared, one chilling truth emerged. When a democracy masters total surveillance, can it ever go back? It began as protest. It ended as infrastructure. Beneath the slogans and marches lay a network built with military precision, financed, compartmentalized, and self-replicating. The FBI's forensic analysis revealed an organization more structured than spontaneous. Each Antifa collective functioned as a microcell, complete with logistics officers, propaganda liaisons, and encrypted moderators. The image of chaotic rebellion shattered. This was command and control. Reuters traced the pattern to an Atlanta-based nonprofit, innocuous on paper, lethal in effect. Over $310,000 passed through its accounts in 6 months. Donations labeled as community defense or environmental aid funded riot gear, gas masks, and travel reimbursements for interstate operatives. When the Treasury cross-checked receipts with raid inventories, a clear trail emerged. Compassion had become camouflage. At exactly 12:03 a.m., agents struck 3 states simultaneously. Safe houses long under surveillance exploded into chaos. Laptops, encrypted drives, and chemical precursors littered the floors. The dawn that followed revealed something unsettling. An ideology once considered fringe had matured into a logistical machine. Reuters confirmed that 61 individuals were indicted in Georgia alone, while BBC News and Al Jazeera reported arrests from Illinois to Oregon. Officials described an organization functioning like a paramilitary grid, cell-based, autonomous, and digitally synchronized. The Guardian called it a decentralized insurgency masquerading as activism. Each region mirrored the next. Portland, Chicago, New York, all used the same manual, Security Culture 101, recovered from raid sites across 3 states. The document outlined encryption methods, burner phone rotations, and operational budgets, a corporate playbook for chaos. DW reported that the same encryption keys appeared in files linked to pro-Russian hacker collectives, suggesting shared tools, if not shared ideology. To dismantle the system, investigators from the FBI's Financial Crimes Division and DHS's Cyber Forensics Unit merged under a single command. Defense News described their work as counter-insurgency through code. Algorithms scanned microtransactions from payment apps, tracing donor clusters to international exchange platforms. In one case, agents uncovered a crypto wallet tied to a Berlin-based anarchist group previously flagged by Europol. This wasn't just national. It was transnational. Jane's Defense Weekly compared Antifa's funding architecture to Cold War sabotage networks, horizontal, fluid, and nearly indestructible. Each node could vanish overnight, replaced by another with the same mission. BBC News likened it to digital guerrilla warfare, where anonymity served as armor. What made the network dangerous wasn't just its financing, it was its moral camouflage. Thousands of small donors believed they were helping protesters post bail or fund climate activism. In truth, they were sustaining a domestic insurgency. Al Jazeera's investigation revealed internal chat logs instructing members to split donations into microgrants under $50 to bypass Treasury oversight. Compassion had become weaponized currency. But the most alarming discovery came from the Seattle raids. Agents found encrypted drives detailing a nationwide logistics plan. Safe houses, encrypted communications, and travel corridors. Analysts dubbed it the corridor system. It resembled the smuggling routes of militant eco groups in Northern Europe, proof of ideological cross-pollination between US and European anarchist cells. The parallels abroad grew sharper. In Ukraine, small volunteer networks use encrypted channels to coordinate logistics. In Israel, cyber collectives support street-level intelligence. In China, state-backed activists deploy microfinancing to destabilize rivals. Each example blurred the border between politics and warfare. DW observed that the same technologies that empower democracy can now sustain its enemies. President Trump's administration framed it as proof that America's enemies no longer wore uniforms, they wore ideology. The Department of Justice restructured its domestic threat matrix, treating decentralized groups like digital militias. The line between insurgency and activism was officially erased. Yet, even as prosecutors built their case, one question unsettled the public. If financing rebellion can happen through good intentions, who bears the guilt? The organizer or the believer? By the time the first indictments were unsealed, one truth had become clear. Antifa was no longer an idea. It was an organism. One that learned, adapted, and hid within the very freedoms it sought to destroy. It began with words that sounded noble. Fight fascism, save the planet, defend the oppressed. For thousands of disillusioned Americans, that slogan was oxygen. But as federal investigators would learn, it was also the lure. Antifa's greatest weapon was never the Molotov cocktail. It was belief. Under President Donald Trump's directive, federal agencies reclassified the case under domestic terrorism and racketeering. What had started as street protest was now treated as insurgency. DHS officials described it bluntly. This isn't activism, it's organization. The Guardian reported that the arrests marked a doctrinal shift from reactive policing to preemptive intelligence. For the first time since the post-9/11 era, domestic counterterrorism focused inward, targeting internal coordination before it ignited violence. According to The Guardian, indoctrination often started online. Cloaked in moral virtue, recruits joined study groups discussing justice, inequality, and environmental activism. The shift came quietly. Reform gave way to resistance, then to rage. DW reported that recruits who questioned violent tactics were excommunicated, branded traitors to the cause. Inside encrypted servers, slogans became scripture. Silence is violence. Action is redemption. Once the language changed, the mind followed. Reuters documented how federal analysts mapped the digital radicalization process across hundreds of Discord and Signal channels. It mirrored extremist grooming patterns seen abroad. Ideology, not hierarchy, provided cohesion. Defense News compared it to jihadist recruitment models, moral outrage as entry point, shared risk as initiation, violence as communion. Every act of defiance was celebrated, every arrest glorified as martyrdom. BBC News found training guides distributed through anonymous accounts titled Direct Action for the People. They taught recruits how to disable surveillance cameras, block police vehicles, and wipe digital footprints. Once an individual completed a first action, they were immortalized online. Profile banners changed, digital badges awarded. It was rebellion gamified. Jane's Defense Weekly called the phenomenon psychological insurgency. Unlike foreign terror groups, Antifa didn't seek territory. It sought moral terrain. Its currency was narrative. Every viral video of confrontation fed recruitment. Every crackdown confirmed the mythology of oppression. Al Jazeera quoted a former member who confessed, "We wanted justice, but justice became vengeance. We stopped fighting fascists. We started fighting shadows." The parallels abroad were undeniable. In France, the ZAD movement fused eco-activism with sabotage. In Germany, the Autonomen used social media to radicalize youth against perceived state violence. Even in the Middle East, ideological militias used similar indoctrination cycles: isolation, escalation, and justification. DW noted that Antifa's structure was not imported, but its psychology was universal. Anger weaponized through community. Inside Washington, Trump's administration labeled it belief-driven extremism. DHS reports described it as faith built on fury. Intelligence officials argued that ideology itself had become the battlefield. Every encrypted chat room was a pulpit, every protest a ritual. And yet, behind the fire and slogans were human faces. Students, veterans, teachers, people who thought they were defending democracy. Some defected before crossing the threshold. Others didn't. Their letters, obtained by Reuters, revealed regret. "We thought we were fighting tyranny," one wrote, "but we became what we hated." President Donald Trump, in a televised address, warned that the enemy is not a country, it's a conviction. The administration's response was as psychological as it was tactical. De-radicalization programs, digital counter-narratives, and AI-driven content disruption. Defense News likened the effort to NATO's counter-propaganda campaigns in Eastern Europe, battling misinformation not with censorship, but with truth. Still, a haunting irony persisted. To save democracy, America now fought ideas with algorithms, dissent with data. Civil rights observers feared the cure might mirror the disease. The Guardian cautioned, a society that polices belief risks inheriting the very totalitarianism it opposes. From Kiev to Gaza, from Berlin to Seattle, the pattern was the same. Chaos thrives where conviction outruns compassion. The war on extremism had evolved beyond bullets and bombs. It was now a war for minds. Why now? Investigators traced the decision back to an ambush near the Prairieland Detention Center in Texas. Attackers used fireworks to lure officers before opening fire. The tactic echoed those seen during Atlanta's Defend the Forest riots. Defense News noted the resemblance to hybrid warfare techniques used by foreign insurgents. Coordinated distraction followed by precision assault. Jane's Defense Weekly went further, labeling Antifa's methods urban guerrilla tactics applied in a democratic landscape. And in that war, America discovered a bitter truth. The most dangerous weapon isn't built in a lab, it's forged in the heart. The courtroom in Fulton County, Georgia was eerily silent as the first of 61 defendants faced the judge. Shackled, expressionless, the accused listened while prosecutors read charges that stretched across 47 pages. Racketeering, arson, conspiracy to commit terrorism. The air was heavy with history. Not since the post-9/11 trials had America seen a domestic case of such scale and symbolism. This was more than a legal proceeding. It was a national reckoning. Reuters confirmed that federal prosecutors were uniting hundreds of encrypted messages, transactions, and protest videos into a single narrative, a coordinated campaign to undermine U.S. governance. The courtroom became the theater of America's ideological war. For the government, it was justice long delayed. For critics, the birth of a dangerous precedent. President Donald Trump stood firm. Justice is not politics, he declared from the White House. Every democracy must defend itself, or it will not remain one. His message resonated with millions who saw in the trials a restoration of order. But others heard a warning, an echo of the McCarthy years when fear blurred the line between vigilance and vengeance. The Guardian called it the moment America looked inward and saw both its strength and its shadow. Legal scholars debated whether the use of RICO laws against decentralized activism redefined extremism itself. Could ideology be prosecuted like organized crime? DW described the trial as a collision between liberty and law, where each verdict would redraw the boundaries of dissent. Beyond U.S. borders, the implications reverberated. Russia framed the crackdown as proof of authoritarian hypocrisy. China's state media labeled it the American cultural purge. Yet NATO allies quietly applauded. European security agencies, already battling militant eco groups and anarchist cells, viewed the FBI DHS model as a template for future operations. BBC News reported that Germany's Interior Ministry was already exploring joint intelligence channels based on America's digital fusion system. Defense News emphasized that the Antifa takedown wasn't just domestic housekeeping, it was a global signal. Washington had demonstrated that democracy could deploy intelligence, law, and cyber warfare inward without collapsing into dictatorship. Analysts called it a controlled burn, meant to contain extremism before it spread across NATO's urban centers. Yet for every victory, there was a wound. Families of those arrested described confusion and disbelief. Many defendants were college students or community organizers whose radicalization blurred into criminality. Their parents watched from the gallery, haunted, silent, broken. Al Jazeera interviewed one mother who said, "My son wanted to save the planet. Now, he's on trial for terrorism." Civil rights lawyers argued that the government had crossed a moral line, punishing intent instead of action. The Justice Department countered that Antifa's structure itself was criminal, its ideology weaponized. The result was a nation split between triumph and unease, between justice and fear. DW analysts warned that the trial's outcome would shape America's self-image abroad. A guilty verdict would project strength but risk moral erosion. An acquittal would embolden radicals worldwide. Either way, the United States had stepped into uncharted territory, waging a war for its soul under the bright lights of a courtroom. The political shock was immediate. Russia accused Washington of weaponizing dissent. China called it proof that American democracy eats itself. Yet NATO allies quietly supported the crackdown, fearing copycat movements emerging in Berlin and Paris. DW analysts warned that militant anarchism, long dismissed as localized chaos, had evolved into a transnational ideological contagion. Outside, protests flared again. Some waved flags of defiance, others held signs demanding peace. Police formed silent lines beneath gray autumn skies. The echoes of chants merged with the whir of surveillance drones overhead. And somewhere between those two sounds, justice and judgment, a deeper question rose. When freedom is defended through prosecution, does it remain freedom at all? The smoke from Atlanta's final protests had barely cleared when Washington unveiled a new doctrine, one that would redefine the relationship between liberty and law. President Donald Trump called it domestic deterrence. Its premise was simple yet seismic. The same precision, intelligence, and coordination used to fight global terrorism would now be applied to protect America from internal extremism.
Reuters reported that the doctrine combined data-driven surveillance, predictive analysis, and financial interdiction into a single operational ecosystem. Civilian reports, digital footprints, and open-source intelligence were now fused through DHS fusion nodes, allowing federal agents to anticipate radical activity before it erupted. The BBC called it preemptive security, an evolution of post-9/11 counterterrorism adapted for the digital age. Supporters hailed it as innovation. Critics called it overreach.
DW described the system as a democracy learning to watch itself, noting that while the technology promised safety, it also threatened to normalize surveillance as a civic duty. Yet in Trump's view, the doctrine was necessary. Freedom, he declared, is not the absence of vigilance, it is its reward.
Globally, the shift reshaped perceptions of American power. Defense News highlighted that NATO analysts viewed domestic deterrence as a prototype for internal security integration across allied democracies. Jane's Defense Weekly noted that the US had fused economic, cyber, and law enforcement power into a deterrent equal to any foreign arsenal. The line between foreign and domestic defense was now a continuum.
Meanwhile, Al Jazeera observed how adversaries seized the narrative. Beijing accused Washington of policing thought, while Moscow labeled the doctrine democracy's self-surveillance experiment. But among US allies, Israel, Poland, and France, officials praised its precision, adapting similar frameworks to monitor their own protest networks. America had exported not just technology, but a philosophy that internal security could be waged like information warfare.
At home, the effects were visible but invisible.
Cameras on street corners, drones above federal buildings, new funding for digital task forces, all woven seamlessly into daily life. The Guardian wrote that America feels quieter now, but quieter in the way a watched room feels. Safety had returned, but so had awareness. The doctrine's reach extended beyond counter-extremism. Financial algorithms once used to track cartel money now monitored political donations flagged for anomalous activity. AI programs originally designed to detect terror chatter began scanning for organized unrest. In Colorado, Oregon, and Georgia, predictive analytics alerted authorities days before protests turned violent. The system worked, yet every success deepened the debate. Had the Republic traded transparency for control?
President Trump's approval ratings surged as order returned to American streets.
To his supporters, it proved that strength and democracy could coexist. To his critics, it signaled a nation inching toward a permanent state of alert. As DW summarized, America has conquered chaos, but it may never sleep again.
Back home, the social fracture deepened.
Families awoke to headlines branding their children as domestic terrorists. Protesters condemned the raids as authoritarian overreach. Police supporters hailed them as long overdue justice. The line between free speech and national security had never looked thinner.
The world watched, divided between admiration and fear.
Ukraine studied the US model to harden domestic resilience against Russian infiltration. Israel adapted its predictive mapping for urban defense. Even China quietly replicated the framework to justify its own surveillance, citing the American example.
In that paradox lay America's new identity:
protector of democracy, architect of oversight. The Guardian concluded, the lesson of 2025 is not that America became authoritarian. It's that democracy evolved into something harder, colder, more self-aware. The Antifa trials, the vigilante crackdowns, the hybrid security doctrine, all threads of a single narrative. A free nation learning the cost of survival in an age of invisible wars. And now, as the cameras dim and the headlines fade, the question remains. How long can a republic defend itself from enemies within before it begins to resemble them?
Through shattered windows and burned out slogans,
A haunting question echoed across the republic. When rebellion becomes organized, does it still belong to democracy, or has it crossed into war? Before dawn broke, federal coordination reached levels unseen since the War on Terror.
Operation Iron Resolve, a joint campaign between the FBI, DHS, and the Department of Justice, unfolded with surgical precision. In Atlanta, cyber units severed encrypted servers as tactical teams breached warehouses. In Portland, drones circled over safe houses while armored vehicles blocked escape routes. By sunrise, the operational map of Antifa's domestic network lay exposed. According to Reuters, this was the largest synchronized federal offensive against the non-state U.S. entity since Oklahoma City. More than 200 warrants were executed across 7 states, targeting logistics hubs, digital command centers, and nonprofit fronts used for financing. Agents seized hard drives containing detailed maps of police facilities, encrypted rosters, and coded ledgers tracking small dollar transactions. Each entry, field support, bail fund, medical aid, masked the flow of weapons, travel stipends, and tactical gear.